Deltarune. I've been obsessed with this game for years now, and the release of chapters 3 and 4 have made that obsession so much worse. So much so that it has inspired me to create a theory video. I think about this game a lot. It is one of the only things bouncing around in the empty shell of my brain. However, I have come up with a theory that I believe answers a majority of the questions we have about nearly all the main characters of this game. I will admit, I have seen this theory floating around before the new chapters came out, but I have a lot more evidence to add to it. The theory is that Ralsei's light world item is Azrael's dust. I know, it's a pretty controversial theory, but just bear with me in my insanity for one moment. This video requires a lot of information from both Undertale and Deltarune, so there will be serious spoilers for both of them. You have been warned. I'm sure we are all familiar with the story of Undertale and its characters. When we first meet Flowey, he seems nice, but it turns out he is the game's main antagonist. Then, we meet Toriel, who is a motherly figure and was the previous queen of the Underground. She warns Frisk about Asgore, and that he would likely kill them. Eventually, we do meet Asgore, and he is just a big softy who is trying to fix the Underground's problems, but is going about it the wrong way. There are also Azrael and Kara, both of which were Toriel and Asgore's kids. These are the main characters from Undertale that I would need to talk about for this theory. In order to digest this idea, I've broken it down into a few topics. First, I will go into depth on the function of the characters in both Undertale and Deltarune, focusing on any similarities that may appear. Second, I will talk about why Ralsei is the Prince of the Dark, based on these roles. Third, I will talk about Toriel's oddly dismissive and avoidant behavior in Deltarune. Fourth, I will describe what the concept of death is in this universe and its implications of someone coming back to life. Fifth, I will tell you what I believe really happened with Azrael and where he might be. Finally, I will describe what each character's motives would be if this theory happens to be true. Section 1. Explaining the characters in Undertale, starting with Flowey and Azrael. What do we know about Flowey? We know that Flowey is very much aware of this world story. He's played these games before, literally. He knows what every interaction's outcome is. He's aware that this world he is in is a game. Flowey also speaks to the player on several occasions. He even says at the beginning of the game that he is the prince of this world. Later in the story, we learn that Flowey is a mixture of Azrael's dust and determination on a golden flower. This combination of ingredients brought him back, losing most of his personality but seemingly retaining some of his memories in the right circumstances. He is extremely aware of what he is, and he hates himself for it. He lashes out and he channels his anger and grief towards everyone and everything around him, in hopes that eventually he can become himself again. He accomplishes this when he takes all of the souls in the Underground and becomes Azrael Dreamer again, even if only for a little bit. So what can we take away from this? Azrael is the son of Toriel and Asgore, which makes him the prince of the Underground. He is hyper aware of this entire story, and he is aware that he himself is in this game. Keep this in your head for later. Kara. Kara is the first human that fell into the Underground and was getting taken care of by Toriel and Asgore. Kara is a weird child who likes chocolate, is shown to have red eyes, likes carrying around a knife, and tends to be an all-around menace. They have a hatred for humanity and wants to team up with Azrael to take over the human world. They end up eating buttercups and literally dying to give their soul to Azrael for this cause. However, Azrael resisted fighting the humans on the surface and instead returned to the Underground with fatal injuries. Kara is a child who has passed away but returns when the player chooses the Jenna route. They are aware of the rules of this world, the fact that numbers increase when a monster is defeated. The concept of leveling up is satisfying to them. To summarize it, Kara is a freak child who dislikes their own humanity, they are shown to have red eyes, they wield a knife, they wear a green and yellow sweater and have brown pants, and they also have brown hair. They are also very much aware that this game is a game that they are in. Toriel. Toriel was the queen of the Underground. She has interacted with the previous humans that fell into the Underground, and one by one watched them all leave and die, their souls collected by Asgore. She isolated herself in the ruins in hopes of moving on from what happened with her, Asgore, and the rest of her family, Kara and Azrael. She and Sans also share a sort of bond through the doors of the ruins. They tell each other jokes and help each other laugh and smile. She is a single mother who lost both of her children and copes by distracting herself and caring for others. She is leaning on her and Sans' friendship to help distract herself through these hard times, and this is the biggest takeaway of Toriel's character in Undertale. Asgore. Asgore is the king of the underground. His goal is to shatter the barrier that keeps the monsters underground and bring everyone back together. He misses his happy life with Toriel and the kids, though in order to do so, he is staying underground and waiting for more humans to fall into the underground to take their souls. He is a sad and lonely man who just wants things to get better, but he is going about it in a cruel and immoral way. His methods may harm others, but in his eyes, it will give him a chance to see Toriel again. He just wants to be a happy family again after all. Death and information. Both Azrael and Kara have been long since dead by the beginning of Undertale, but throughout the game's story, we learn that these two characters behave very differently than others. We can see it most with Flowey or Azrael. Flowey knows about the rules of the world, knows about and can use the save system. He understands leveling up, and he breaks the fourth wall, understanding that there is a player behind the screen. Kara is the same way. They know that the player inputs a name for the fallen human. They see and understand every time a number increases when a monster is defeated. But why are these two deceased characters talking about all this stuff? Stuff that is seemingly outside of their possible understanding. To add on to this a little more, both Kara and Flowey Azrael have the ability to alter the game's mechanics in battle. Flowey demonstrates it in his Omega battle by completely removing the in-universe menu of the game, rendering the player useless. Kara demonstrates this at the end of the Jenna route by appearing and attacking the player directly without a battle screen. These are just minor details, but something I noticed and thought they were interesting. It is within my belief that death in this universe reveals a deeper understanding of the world. Monsters aren't supposed to come back, but if they do, they come back with a completely different understanding of the world. I'm unsure how exactly this is the case. Maybe it's something related to Gasto or something, but that's just speculation. Again, very interesting. How much of this actually translates into Deltarune though? A lot. Toriel, missing her child Azrael, tends to spend a lot of her time distracting herself with work or fun. She has a human child who she doesn't really understand, as seen by the multiple times she took out the How to Take Care of Humans book from the library. She is a teacher, something she's always wanted to be in Undertale. In Chapter 2, we see that Sans and Toriel's bond is also present. They share jokes with one another and have a lot of fun. She seems to turn to Sans to help cope with the loss of her son Azrael, whether he's off to college or worse. Her and Chris's bond seem to also be a bit shaky. She often worries for Chris, like when they do this sometimes, but she never really does anything to figure it out. Asgore runs the Flower King shop, a shoddy flower shop that doesn't make enough money to cover his bills. We learn that Asgore is looking forward to Azrael coming back home, and that he should return soon. In Chapter 4, we also learn that Asgore is looking into things that he probably shouldn't be, by sneaking around in Kegel's home. He's trying to make things right, trying to show everyone the truth, and trying to be a happy family again. Asgore is once again longing for the past. Chris is a strange human child who seems to dislike their own humanity. We know that they used to wear red horns as a kid and try to fit in more. They are a bit of a prankster and are known to cause problems, and especially so for Noelle. They also have red eyes, wield a knife, wear a green and yellow sweater, and brown pants. They also seem to have motives beyond the player's understanding, and seems to be aware that they are in a game being controlled by someone. They even look towards the camera when we make them do uncomfortable things, like in the sword route of Chapter 3. They try to stop us from controlling them, but are utterly incapable most of the time. They are a human character who dislikes humans, but is being controlled by a human they have no power over, the player. The amount of connections between Kara and Chris are downright insane to me. Azrael. We know the least about Azrael in the Deltarune universe, and I think this is intentional from Chris's perspective. He is the son of Toriel and Asgore, just like in Undertale, and is presumably off to college. He seems to be a star child, as his side of the bed is well decorated with trophies, photos, and a computer. People around town seem to miss him, like Caddy or Brady or one of the two, or both, I don't remember. We know he has a room in Queen's Castle, but Chris does not allow us to see the contents of that room. From what we know, these rooms contain each light and accessories. It would be quite revealing if Chris let us see into that room. We know that Azrael and Tenna used to be buddies along with Des, implying that the Dreamers and the Holidays were once close. When praying for Azrael in the church, Chris barely tries. When bringing Susie over to Chris's home, she points out the pictures on the fridge, and Chris seems to point out all the differences between Azrael's photo and Ralsei's appearance. There are a surprising handful of moments we get to hear about Azrael, but it is only that. We don't see him anywhere in the game, aside from Tenna's flashback scene. Each of these characters play a very similar, almost parallel role to how they were in Undertale. It's almost like Deltarune is Undertale's parallel story or something. Wait. Section 2. Ralsei is the Prince of the Dark. One of Ralsei's first lines of dialogue is him stating that he is this world's prince, the Prince of the Dark. At first glance, that doesn't make much sense. He has a kingdom, but it's empty. He has no subjects, no king, no queen, though repeatedly we are told that he is the prince. Even in the prophecy, he is depicted as such. Though, how could this be the case? I have an answer. In Chapter 3, we see Toriel in the Dark World. She is depicted sitting on a throne, in a dress, and wearing a crown. She appears to be a queen in the dark. Or perhaps she is the queen of the dark. Perhaps it is more like Ralsei's title. Asgore runs a flower shop in the light world known as the Flower King. In the prophecy, Asgore is depicted with a king's crown. Perhaps he is the king of the dark. Therefore, if Toriel is the queen of the dark, and Asgore is the king of the dark, surely that would mean Asriel is the prince of the dark, right? What does that make Ralsei then? I think they have to be the same. You might be wondering, but we already have a king and queen in the Dark World, and I have a counter-argument. King is the name of a darkner based on a chess piece. When the darkness formed, this name and power associated with this chess piece must have granted him that power, as kings tend to have strong roles. His name and role just happens to be king. And for queen, her name isn't even actually queen. She is a laptop that was in the public library, and her name is Q5UE something something. Perhaps in the light world, she was the object that was used the most, granting her her power in the dark world. My point is that King played his role as a king in his dark world, and Queen did the same in hers, though neither of them are the King of the Dark or the Queen of the Dark, similarly to how Ralsei is the Prince of the Dark. We can even relate these characters' roles in Undertale back to this. Asgore is the King of the Underground, and Toriel was the Queen. Asriel was the Prince. Even as Flowey, he called himself the Prince of this world, just as Ralsei called himself the Prince of this kingdom. There are too many similarities for this to just be a coincidence. Section 3. Toriel's behavior in Deltarune. I found Toriel's behavior in Deltarune to be very odd, especially when Asriel is brought up in conversation. It happens multiple times throughout the chapters. Every time questions arise about when he's coming back, she runs off or changes the subject. Sometimes she even runs before he is brought up. To me, this reads as stressed and afraid. Something happened that she doesn't feel like talking about, and even when Chris isn't there. She knows Asgore's need to look into things and fears him asking questions that could be revealing. I think Asgore believes Toriel about where Asriel is, but is starting to question it. Overall, Toriel to me seems to be acting aloof, or even frantic, but I will touch more on this later. Section 4. Ralsei's and Gerson's abundance of information. These new chapters told us so much about Ralsei. They told us that he genuinely knows everything there is to know about the world of Deltarune. He knows all of the prophecy. He knows what items other characters can equip. He knows information about the light world, the location of the dark fountain in the school, the location of the spare classroom, the location of the library, of the Dreamer household, and of the church. In his flashback, he shows an image of the light world version of the Dreamer's hallway. He even shows an image of, presumably, Susie's bedroom. He even knows about which buttons to press, and knows he needs to relay that information to Chris. He is familiar with the concept that there is a player and looks directly at the camera in a certain scene in Chapter 3 when control is questioned. Gerson Boom, too, knows a lot of information. He is quite cryptic about sharing it, though. His information is mostly about the light world, considering that's where he spent his life. He was a story writer, the one who wrote the Lord of the Hammer series. Those books are based on the prophecy, which seems to appear in both worlds. Gerson had the insight to see something was bothering Susie, and helped her find her spark back. But he also knew that if he wanted to speak to Alvin again, he'd need to relay a message through Susie by having her write a letter after she woke up. Gerson knew exactly what he was. He knew that when this dark world closed, he would no longer be alive. Gerson can also move incredibly quick and teleport at times. We see it when Gerson talks to Susie right after the Jackenstein fight, and during his battle. This was alluding and foreshadowing to the fact that he is dead. Ralsei does something similar too, more specifically when he travels to other dark worlds. I believe something about his nature allows him to teleport or travel between different dark worlds, but I'll cover more on this later. Ralsei and Gerson also showcase a unique ability in Chapter 4. Firstly, Gerson can interact with battles in his own unique way. He can spare his own darkners and seem to mess with the flow of battles himself. Ralsei too can interact with the battles themselves After fighting the statue of Gerson, Ralsei forcibly ends the battle by moving outside of it and destroying it. This feels almost like it is trying to tell us that these two characters are able to innately alter the actual game mechanics, similarly to Flowey and Kara. They can move on their own accord. And what do all these characters have in common? They are all dead. Each of these characters has died and come back in their own way. Something about dying makes them capable of seeing and interacting with the environment in a meta way. Though this last part is all stretchy, and it is admittedly not my strongest point, I still think that death grants characters a level of meta-knowledge. Okay, but if Azrael is dead, where would he be? I believe I know the answer. In our first encounter with Susie, she threatens to kill Chris. However, she withdraws and says that she doesn't want to make Toriel bury her own child. Toriel in both universes tends to be avoidant. She consistently avoids talking about Azrael coming home. She refuses to explain to Susie why she won't finish baking the pie at the end of Chapter 2. She even runs away from her responsibilities in the church simply because it was rainy. When she is afraid or inconvenienced, she doesn't speak up. She changes course. If Toriel were ever put into a situation where she'd need to bury her own child, I don't think she would. She would avoid the grief of doing so, believing it'd be best for everyone. She would suffer more so that others won't. Just like Ralsei withholds the harsh truth of reality in order to protect everyone. If anyone should hurt, it's Toriel. Just as Ralsei said himself, they are both holding in dark truths and are suffering the consequences of knowing everything. Though, I still have yet to answer that question. Just after Susie says that line, you enter the Dark World, and the first character you are properly introduced to is Ralsei. And where is this Dark World exactly? Ralsei tells us that he has been waiting here for them. This Dark World is in the school closet. I believe Azrael's dust is stored away in the school's closet. Ralsei being a prince alone in the deepest dark would make a lot more sense if this were the case. Azrael, long since dust, literally being left alone in the darkness of the closet. This would explain Ralsei's broken concept of time, broken concept of friends, and explain why he feels he shouldn't have feelings. If Ralsei truly knows everything, he'd understand how he is supposed to be, act, and feel. He understands darkners cannot possess real feelings, and how they are simply ordinary objects in the light world. He even understands the concept of lightners coming back to life in certain darknesses, like the Grand Fountain. Heck, maybe even the standard darkness of the school closet contributed to it, and maybe the standard darkness of Alvin's desk drawer contributed to Gerson as a character. To push this idea even further, I think that Ralsei's beliefs stem from survivor's guilt. Ralsei knows he should be dead, but he's not, and now he knows things normal lightners aren't supposed to know. He knows so much that he doesn't know when to speak up or just to stay quiet. It's just something to keep in mind, since I think this makes sense for him. Other miscellaneous things about Ralsei that bother me. There are a couple of other oddities I have noticed about Ralsei. The first one is that when he first meets the heroes, he states that they need to fulfill the ancient prophecy foretold by time and space. I want to call attention to this wording of time and space. We know that Gaster was shattered across time and space. Why use that wording, Mr. Tricky Tony Fox? What are you trying to tell us? That the prophecy is actually written by Gaster and that Ralsei knows even that? Was all of this information given to Ralsei by Gaster, which is why he didn't ask to know it, but he just does? Also, what is up with Ralsei's down sprite? Why is it that he just turns into a ball of fluff? Why are the only things that are remaining are his clothes? Does this imply that his body turns into a dust-like substance when he's downed? Does this mean he's also literally dead? Also, why does he now float in his running animation? Also, what is up with the Ralsei's revived Chris spell in the Titan fight? Why does it have angel wings and a halo? Also, why does Ralsei run away whenever you seal the fountain? Why doesn't he seal the fountain with you guys? It's almost like he's trying to hide the item that he is. Ralsei is dead. This man is dead. Okay, but if this were the case, how could this have happened? My personal timeline, again, it's kind of speculative, goes as follows. Des goes missing, the families get separated, Toriel gets divorced, Azrael loses his position in the police force, and everyone stops hanging out at the Dreamer household. Then, wanting everything to get better, Azrael wants to find Des in hopes of bringing the family back together, and bringing back his love, though he dies in the process. Perhaps he explored what was past the caution tape to the west of the police office. It is in Asriel's nature to go off on his own, after all, like we see in Undertale. Alone and left with her thoughts, Toriel then goes out looking for the now missing Asriel. She finds him. His dust spread across the ground where no one dared to look. She gathers his dust and thinks about giving him a proper monster burial. She visits the graveyard to find a spot for Asriel and finds Susie instead. She comforts her like she would with her own child. Then she opts to hide the truth, taking a beloved item, the red horned headband, and hiding it where no one would look. The school closet. Toriel comes up with the lie that Asriel is off to college. It's the best that she can come up with and isn't too distant from reality. He's now resting in the school, after all. Asgore is likely the one to hear about this news and spreads the information throughout the town, even getting an estimated date when Asriel is expected to come home. It is now only a matter of time before Toriel's lie becomes revealed to the town, which explains her frantic and avoidant nature. Something to keep in mind with this timeline is that these events would have to be 2 to 4 years prior to the start of Deltarune, depending on how long Asriel has been missing for. But if this theory is true, what would that mean for all the other characters? What would their motives be? For Chris, their motive is to help the knight cover the world in darkness to help find Asriel, the real Asriel. Chris knows that Asriel and Ralsei are visually different. Chris often ignores Ralsei completely and refrains from interacting with him as much as possible. There are several text box choices that are just mean to Ralsei, and I think these reflect Chris's inner thoughts about Ralsei, though Chris stops themselves from saying them most of the time. Chris also doesn't want us to meddle in their family affairs. They often hide information about their family from us, and get really frustrated with the player in the Snowgrave route, especially in Chapter 4. Des. If Des is the knight, this would be her motive, to cover the world in darkness and bring back Asriel. Des knows that Ralsei is different from Asriel somehow, perhaps the red horns with the glasses or something, but it is obvious that Ralsei does not pass as Asriel to the other characters in this world, other than Susie. She understands the situation with Chris and the soul, and thinks that it may be the key to help find Asriel. Carol would be working with the knight through Chris's communication. Her motive is to find and restore Des to who she used to be, and she likely knows about the Dark Worlds, considering she most likely has a black shard in her office. I think that Asgore found that in her office, the black shard. Asgore is also looking into the Death Knight, or just Des's disappearance. He wants to have a happy family again, but is stuck trying to fix the events of the past, meaning whatever happened to Des. He wants to know what's going on with her, Asriel and Carol. And for Asriel, his motive was that he wanted Des back. He just wanted to have a happy family again, for everyone to be back together. He would want nothing more than to see the light world again, to see his sibling and his parents. That explains Ralsei's longing for the light world in the beginning of Chapter 3. He literally says he would want nothing more than to go, but he just can't. Very reminiscent of Asriel at the very end of the True Pacifist route. He just can't come back. Toriel's motive. She wants to leave everything in the past and move on. She just doesn't want to think about anything else and live her life as if nothing happened. These are all the motives that I could come up with for each of the characters. If anyone wants to add to this, feel free to do so in the comments. I'd really love to hear your thoughts about it all. To summarize all of my claims, I believe Ralsei is Asriel's dust stored away in the school closet by Toriel in order to avoid hurting others by spreading the truth about her deceased child. We've never had an alive and well Asriel, and if he was alive, it would go against his entire plot as a character. Ralsei is the Prince of the Dark, which would only make sense if Asriel was that role, meaning they must be the same character. Toriel displays avoidant behavior which causes her to make mistakes as a parent, and Ralsei shows traits that seem to be universal with deceased characters in this franchise. As much as I really don't want this theory to be true, it just makes so much sense. I want to see an alive and happy Asriel as much as the next person, but unfortunately I don't think that's the point of Asriel's character. He has always been a tragedy, and I believe it will remain that way in Deltarune. But hey, who knows? Maybe in Chapter 5 Asriel will just walk into frame and void this entire theory. There are a couple of things that I should add at the very end of this, as questions for you guys, and for myself too. The main question is, well, how does Ralsei travel to other Dark Worlds? How does he know about that? And I personally think we shouldn't know about that yet. We don't have the answer. It might be behind the door in his castle town and behind the cauldron. Maybe that's like a room to teleport to other Dark Worlds or something. Maybe it has something to do with the Grand Fountain that we don't know about yet. I don't think we have the answer yet, and I don't think we're supposed to. One of my friends suggested the idea that Ralsei's dust was like spread everywhere, and that he could just appear everywhere if that's the case. But my counter argument to that is, if Azrael's dust is just spread everywhere, where was he at the beginning of the second sanctuary? Wasn't his whole goal to stop Susie from seeing the prophecy? You'd think Ralsei would know about that new Dark Fountain opening immediately and be there. Another question that I don't have the answer to is, how did the Grand Fountain even form? Who did that? Was it the knight? Was it Azrael somehow? It obviously wasn't there when Toriel put the dust there, so how did it form? What causes a grand fountain to form, and what makes it so grand? Again, don't think we have the answer to this, but if you guys have an answer to it, feel free to brainstorm in the comments. I'd love that.